Center. Just wanted to let you know we're going to get started with the next event in just a couple of minutes. The event is hosted by the Mississippi River Cities, the Mississippi River in the U.S., and the event is called Sustaining the World's Food-Producing River Basins. Sustaining the World's Food-Producing River Basins. So we'll get started in just a couple minutes. Thank you. to make
Yes,
sure.
ma'am.
The moderator is Chris Coleman, Mayor of St. Paul.
Correct.
Okay, great, perfect. And so my understanding is that when you speak, we'll be doing it at the podium, and you'll be able to see the PowerPoint presentation here. He's going to click through, and during the question and answer session, you just use this mic here. The technician controls it, so there's no button, no on and off button. Okay? Yes, we'll get you glasses of water as well. Thank you.
But it'll go away and you can re-up it. Thank you. I can always send you my photos.
Okay, ready to go? Fantastic. Okay. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Hi, everyone. I'm Ashley Allen. I'm with the State Department's Climate Change Office. Thanks so much for joining us for this event, hosted by Mississippi River Cities and Town Initiative. And the event is called Sustaining the World's Food-Producing River Basins. Thank you so much for coming, and thank you for our online audience for tuning in. Be sure to hashtag #AskUSCenter on Twitter to join the conversation and to ask questions of the panelists during the Q&A. Those of you out in the audience, feel free to tweet as well, and toward the end, we'll run around a microphone for a question and answer. I'd like to introduce our moderator for the event. Our moderator will be Chris Coleman, who is the mayor of St. Paul, Minnesota in the U.S. Chris?
Well, thank you so much, Ashley. Thank you so much for hosting us here tonight, and thank you all for being here. All of you that are here at the pavilion with us, we appreciate your attendance. We also have a video broadcast that I believe is being broadcast live streamed over the State Department website, and so for those of you that are participating over in the United States, we say good morning to you. It's evening here in Paris. We've had quite an extraordinary week here in Paris. We've had an amazing opportunity for us to meet with our colleagues in river basins across the globe. We've had an opportunity to talk about best practices and how we can work together. But most importantly, we've had an opportunity to stand with the people of Paris, to stand with them in the wake of the tragedy of November 13th, and to be here with them to show solidarity, and we are very grateful for that opportunity. And thanks the people of Paris so much for their hospitality. I know that many of our mayors had a chance to meet with the Mayor Hidalgo as part of our conference of mayors. And it's been kind of fun to be a mayor in Paris this week because the mayors have gotten a lot of attention, whether you're a mayor of a basin city or whether you are part of the Mayor's Climate Protection Compact. We are very happy to have the mayors of the world be heard. As Ashley mentioned, I'm Chris Coleman. I am the mayor of the city of St. Paul, Minnesota, which is the headwaters of the navigable portion of the Mississippi River. I am here with several of my colleagues, Mayor Dave Kleiss from St. Cloud, Minnesota, Roy Buell from Dubuque, Butch Brown from Natchez, Mississippi, and unfortunately my co-chair of the Mississippi River Cities and Towns Initiative, Mayor Hiram Copeland of Vidalia, Louisiana, was unable to join us here for this trip, but I know that he is here in spirit. We have had a great opportunity, as I've mentioned, to meet with many of our colleagues, including representatives of INBO, which is the International Basin Organization. We had a great meeting, and you will hear from Jean-François Doncier, Secretary General for INBO, in just a little bit. We will also hear from Patricia Beneke, who is the Director of the Director and Regional Representative for North America for the United Nations Environmental Program. You will also have an opportunity to hear from Mayor Roy Buell, as I mentioned, from Dubuque, Iowa. And we will also hear from Gustav Borchardt, if I hope I pronounced that, Gustav, correctly, President of the International Commission for the Protection of the Rhine. It's very great to see that so many basin cities, basin communities are working together to deal with the great rivers of the world, to understand the impacts of climate change and to understand what we need to do collectively to make sure that we protect our waterways, that we work on issues of food security, freshwater security, and that we play our role in adaptation and resiliency as it relates to the impacts of climate change on rivers. MRCTI is an organization, a collective organization of 68 of the cities, mayors of the cities along the Mississippi River Basin. And many of you, of course, know the importance of the Mississippi River. It's one of the great waterways of the world, but it has a huge footprint, not only in the United States, where it covers really, if you look at the entire, if you broadly define the Mississippi River Basin, you're talking about 37 states, you're talking about the entire central portion of the country from the Alleghenies to the Rockies. But the economic impact of the Mississippi River is very, very significant. $405 billion in annual revenue, directly supporting 1.3 million jobs. 20 million people getting their drinking water out of the Mississippi River on a daily basis. 40% of all agricultural exports, including 60% of the grain output that is moved along the Mississippi River, making it possible, we always call it the breadbasket of the Midwest and the Mississippi River Basin, the breadbasket of America, and quite frankly, given the level of exports of food products across the globe, it really is a breadbasket for the entire world. It is not without its challenges, as you can imagine. Any river that is 5,000 kilometers long has challenges with respect to the governance of the river and collaboration along those rivers. As mayors, we're trying to be collaborative and really view this not just as a series of individual cities or communities, but really as a single 5,000 mile long river. We don't have the challenges that some rivers like the Rhine do that touch upon 9 or 10 countries. We see that in a number of places, a number of river basins that have multinational jurisdictions. We have, however, 31 congressional districts that touch the Mississippi River, and sometimes I think I'd rather have 10 different countries than 31 different congressmen representing our area. What we've seen with the impacts of climate change are very extreme conditions. Over the last several years, we have had successive 100, 200, and 500-year flood events along the basin of the Mississippi River. We've also seen severe drought impacting and really significantly reducing the economic input of the river. We saw the impacts of Hurricane Katrina and Hurricane Isaac. The drought of 2012 alone cost nearly $35 billion in losses in economic output along the Mississippi River Basin, which makes it one of the most expensive natural disasters in the history of the United States, not necessarily one that gets recognized. I believe that we have an image up here, perhaps, if we are lucky, of what the Mississippi River would look like if there was a complete melting of the polar ice caps. We could go on and on about the disaster that would befall the Mississippi River Basin, as well as basins across the country or across the globe, if we saw the most extreme impacts of climate change. But we're not here to just talk about doom and gloom and paint a picture of worst-case scenarios. We're really here to talk about what it is that we will do collectively as mayors, the 68 mayors along the Mississippi River Basin, how we will work with our colleagues in the other great river basins across the globe to work together to deal with the impacts of climate change, to make sure that we protect fresh water, to make sure that we have the water resource as irrigation for our farm fields, the rivers as navigation tools that significantly reduce carbon footprints in shipping our goods to market. We are here to have a positive direction and work together to figure out how we can protect the great rivers of the world. One of the folks that's been working on this for a great deal of time and has been a true leader on that is the mayor of Dubuque, Iowa, a beautiful city on the Mississippi River. If you get a chance to visit Dubuque, I guarantee you will not regret it. It is an absolutely gorgeous stretch of the river. But the leader of that great city, Mayor Roy Buell, has been an exceptional leader on protecting the Mississippi River. And at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Mayor Buell.
Well, thank you, Mayor Coleman. More than 35% of the world's traditional cropland is located within major river basins comprising 525 million hectares across 5 continents, producing the vast majority of the world's food supply. In conjunction, less than 1% of the world's stock of freshwater resources, freshwater resources is accessible by people. Of that, less than 1%. Rivers sustain the most withdrawals, and yet rivers account for 0.006% of the world's fresh water. These two ecosystem services provided by rivers make them essential to life on Earth. 2/3 of the world's population will live in cities by 2030. Some of the major food-producing river basins of the world include the Paraná, Mississippi, Ganges, Three Rivers region of China, and the Rhine-Danube. Not coincidentally, 10 of the most populous river basins of the world, like the Ganges, Indus, Three Rivers region of China, the Nile, and the Rhine-Danube, will account for 1/4 of the global GDP by 2050. All of this means that it is critical to improve our rivers and keep our basins sustainable, lest we compromise our food and water supply. Cities drink the water and eat the food provided by these basins, so we have the most to lose from compromised river systems. In fact, in the U.S., 60% of Americans obtain their drinking water from rivers. Yet all river basins are being impacted by climate change. Because of these realities, the mayors of the Mississippi River have begun a partnership with the United Nations Environment Program, the International Network of Basin Organizations, the International Society for River Science, and Eco-America to create an international river sustainability agreement to mitigate the impacts of climate change on rivers, lakes, and aquifers by pursuing food and water security. For us on the Mississippi River, we're blessed with the most agriculturally productive zone on Earth. That said, if we don't protect the other food-producing river basins of the planet from climate change, then we run the risk of the Mississippi River being called on to feed the world. If we meet that demand through conventional means, it will devastate our river valley. The agreement we are seeking here in Paris focuses on water quality and sustainable agriculture specifically because practicing conservation, sustainable agriculture, robust water monitoring, and filtering of urban runoff protects our access to fresh water and sustains our ability to produce food. Let us make 2 points abundantly clear. First, the mayors of the Mississippi River are making the improvement of water quality a top priority, and we're willing to take significant steps and expend significant political capital to achieve measurable results. Why? Because the practices that achieve clean water also achieve sustainable agriculture and resilience to climate change. And two, we are shifting our economies from being supported by natural resources to supporting the health and well-being of those resources by our economies. This requires buy-in from river basins and cities across the globe. We know that climate impacts are playing out for other food-producing river basins of the world. In fact, according to the United Nations, climate change poses severe and distinct threats to food security and could subject an additional 600 million people to malnutrition by 2080. When you look at the scale by which we depend on our basins worldwide, the UN's prediction crystallizes. China's Three River region produces food for nearly 20% of the world's population. The Ganges River Basin supports 400 million people, and the Paraguay-Paraná River system in South America provides drinking water, food, and energy to 70 million people. But unlike the Mississippi River and many of the rivers in China, most basins are multinational, creating unique challenges that can only be addressed by international venues such as the COP. That is why MRCTI chose this venue to pursue this work. Over the course of the last week, we have conducted talks with river basins around the world. First, we held a scoping session with stakeholders like Dr. Victor Hugo Alcazar Yamanaka, Deputy Director General for the National Water Commission of Mexico, Mr. Kabin Komara, High Commissioner of the Senegal River Basin, Gabriel Hakizimana, Director of Environment for the Lake Tanganyika Authority of Burundi, and Sanjeev Kumar, Joint Secretary for the Indian Ministry of Environment. We then engaged in talks on solutions headlined by the International Commission for the Protection of the Rhine. And for more on what managing our water sustainability looks like in the face of climate change, I would like to bring up Gustav Borchardt, President of the Commission. Gustav?
Thank you very much for the introduction. Thank you very much for having invited us. And in the first place, I'd like to share the words of the Mayor of St. Paul, of our feelings for Paris, of course, and France after the horrible things which happened. Let's say something about the Rhine. I think I'd like to introduce the Rhine also with some facts. The Rhine is a success story. The Rhine is a precursor for many other water basins which are taking place at the moment. The Rhine is a place where effectively we have about 1,300 kilometers, so it's smaller than your Mississippi. But it is the river which has the most navigation in the world. We have about 60 million people living in the Rhine Basin. And we have the Rhine for drinking water for 30 million people. The bordering land of the Rhine, you can share it in 50% for agriculture. Then there are about 30% forests, 10% industry, and 10% for recreation, tourism, etc. In that sense, it is comparable, I think, to what you are confronting with in the US with your Mississippi. The industry started very early in the Rhine, especially the heavy industry, the chemical industry, but also the mining industry and the metal industry, which of course are industries which pollute a lot. So the fight against pollution of chemicals is not of yesterday in the Rhine. It is already for a long time. And for that reason, the member states, which are in the water basin, and it's mentioned already, thought and were of the opinion that they had to cooperate together. We have 9 member states, from Switzerland, France, Germany, Belgium, the Netherlands, and then we have the observers which are in the water basin, Austria, Liechtenstein, and the European Union. That's quite a number in which they have to work together. But they have come to the conclusion that if you don't work together, we will have the problems of one member state, which we have to share together, otherwise it won't function. And that's what happened. So after the 50s, effectively, the pollution was of such a level that at the end, the downside of the river in the Netherlands, there were all the bad chemicals coming from the upside. And the Dutch wanted already to have a cooperation, but it was so slow at that time because it had to be done in agreements. Then, as very often, unfortunately, in environmental developments, disasters happened. We had a fire in Basel, in Switzerland. In one of the pharmaceutical industries, and the water which was used for blushing came into the river, and the whole Rhine was dead, ecologically dead. That was the real beginning of the success story of the Rhine, and the reason why effectively the Rhine got the International River Prize for its modern approach of an integrated water policy, because that was being put down at that moment. What was decided in the year '86 when that disaster took place? it was decided to have a policy against chemicals. It was decided to bring backward the ecological continuity. With the fantastic slogan, it was, the salmon has to come back from the North Sea to Basel. And that was a revolution at that moment, because there was no fish, there was nothing anymore in the Rhine. And there was a calendar put on it. There was a calendar of 2020, so we are nearing it. And you can see, and I will tell you, it is working very well. And at the same time, there were extraordinary floodings. Serious towns, big towns were being flooded like Cologne, Strasbourg, and in the Netherlands. So also in that framework, at that moment was set up a program against flooding. These three elements, ecological continuity, the chemicals, and the floodings were the basis of the success. What happened with the chemicals was that now 96% of the population of 60 million is being linked to water treatment plants. That has been an enormous success. So most of the chemicals are out of the water. It has given the water a very high quality. That, of course, has given back the possibility of those fish and the ecological continuity. At that time, there was no fish at all, and at the moment, we have more or less 8,000 salmons already going up to Basel, which is an enormous success. But it is not only the question of the chemicals or the quality of the water, it is also that there are a lot of hydropower stations. And the hydropower stations mean that we have to build a lot of fish passages, which are very expensive. So now there is an investment of about 500 million euros to get that done. It is being done, and we are working on the last parts of the total freedom of the fish passages. For the floodings, there is a whole program being made of giving space to water, so that towns, and perhaps it happens also in the Mississippi, have to go back to give space to the water. The same is for agriculture. Not use your crops, building your crops, growing until the water, but go further down and let the water, if necessary, go over that. That are three very important ingredients for the flooding elements. Then probably it's important because you put a lot of emphasis on the agriculture. Agriculture is, of course, a very polluting exercise. But we have put up programs for reducing the nitrates. We have programs for helping the farmers to have more environmental friendly policies. But you can imagine that reducing nitrates is not an exercise which you can measure from today to tomorrow, because the nitrates, if you take them out or you use them less, they have been in the groundwater, and before they go up in the surface water, it takes time. So that are long-term plannings. But there is serious success. What is the influence of climate change on these three different elements? Of course there is. First of all, we have now also a program for climate change. Does it change a lot of what we were doing? No, I don't think so, because the main problems were already being dealt with, but they are intensified. Of course, if the water is warming up, the ecological continuity, the fish will have an effect of that. So in that sense, it is necessary to find a good balance of the freshwater temperatures. That is an important thing for the future. Then, of course, the changes of summer and winter. In summer, there will be more dry weather. In winter, there will be more floodings. And that has a consequence, for example, on the water availability in summer in the Netherlands, bordering the sea. Because if there is less water coming from the Rhine, the water from the sea will come into the Netherlands and will have an effect of putting, the word in English, saltification? Anyway, salt into the water, and so is very bad for agriculture. In that way, there are now all kinds of programs of finding the right way and the balancing way of putting the right balance of the water when the water level goes down. So I think that are main questions which we are studying at the moment. There is a great solidarity between the member states. There is a greater knowledge of our monitoring stations and a very good cooperation between them. We have, of course, some different problems from you in the Mississippi because we have different languages, we have different cultures, and we have some different ideas about who does it better. But we are overcoming that. We are overcoming that, and there is a tendency to have a more common feeling of it is an affair which we have to deal together. And we are successful in that. And I hope we can be also for other water basins a good example how you can work together, how your governments can be organized, how is the best way to make progress in these difficult questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, President Borchardt. I will make one correction. We too have many different languages spoken along the Mississippi River. And I point to Butch Brown as an example of the very different languages spoken down in his part of the world from where we are. Thank you so much. That was a wonderful story. Inspiring story to have the Rhine come back to the status that it is today. We've of course heard so many times the horror stories of our rivers, the Cuyahoga in Ohio burning in the late 60s or early 70s. Many of our communities turned their backs on our rivers for many years. And I think the one thing that I love about working with mayors is seeing them discover their riverfronts and really understanding the rivers as an asset, not just as a place to put our waste and our industry. The Mississippi River Basin has not played as significant of a role in the international conversations as I think that we should have been playing. It's one of the things that MRCTI is working very hard to correct, to really be in that international conversation about our river basins. But of course, it is very fortunate that we have the International Basin Organization that has been doing so much of the work already, leading the way in those conversations and helping us understand how we can continue to be a part of that dialogue on adaptation to climate change, on resiliency, et cetera. The leader of the International Basin Organization has done a wonderful job of leading those conversations across the globe, so knowledgeable about the challenges that many of our rivers face in every part of the world. And we are very, very happy to have him with us here today. And I'd like to, at this time, introduce the Secretary General of the International Basin Organization, Jean-François Dancier.
Good evening. It's also a great pleasure for me and for our network to be with you tonight because it's also a very useful occasions to reinforce our link with your country, the United States, where, to be totally honest, we do not have all the river basin organizations still participating in our organizations. IMBO, the International Network of Basin Organizations, had been created more than 20 years ago in '94 with only one objective: to share experiences. All our members are there just because they have something to share with others, to share their experiences like the Rhine or the Mississippi, and to hear about the experiences of the other, because when we create our networks, we were around 20 people around the table. Today, our networks, as full member of observers, reach around 500 participants. Of course, taking into account the 250 basin organization in Brazil. Brazil itself had more basin organization than all over the world. But progressively, this idea that water had to be managed at basin levels has progressed, because it's a necessity, but also because we are now facing big challenges in basin management and water resources management. Here at the COP, we stress the point that water will be, and maybe is today, the first victim of the climate change. It's the first time in the history of the 20 former COP when we spoke about water as a critical and official issue for the UN system and all the parties working for climate change in the world. Why? Because we know, and there is no doubt, unfortunately, that the climate change is still striking resources, water resources, with an effect no well done to increase the extreme phenomenon, more and more frequent and more serious flooding, more frequent and more serious drought. It will be perhaps at the same time everywhere in the world, so we have not to wait the effect of the decision we are wishing for next 3 days to reduce drastically the emissions of greenhouse gas effect. Because the efficiency of these decisions to be taken, I hope, in Paris will be visible at the end of this century. But water resources are still struck, and we have maybe 2 or 3 decades, no more, to adapt ourselves and not to have to face serious and critical situations everywhere in the world. And it's one of the success of the Water and Adaptation Day last 2 Decembers to put on the table within the UN nation systems that water is a key issue for humanity and also for environment of the planet. So we have to adapt quickly, and we know what we have to do. We know that water is running on the surface and underground at basin level. So we have to manage water resources where they are, at basin levels. Whenever will be the borders or administrative limit that has been created by men. But water do not care about humans being when she is running from upstream to downstream. So basin management is a key issue. And we know also what we have to do in our basin. We have to adapt ourselves quickly to fight against risk of flooding, risk of drought. We have also, first of all, to be careful with water uses. We have to save water everywhere because we are wasting water, even in very arid regions. So we have to fight against the leakage in drinking water system of municipality. You know the figures, more than 50% of the water introduced in the drinking water network disappear because of the leaks. We have also to transform our agriculture. Agriculture is using around the world around 80% of all the waters which has been taken. It's impossible to go on like this because we have to feed around 10 or more billions inhabitants in the next future. So we have to be more efficient with irrigation. It's a key issue to produce more food with less water. Every drop counts. And at this moment, sure, that irrigation is not sufficiently efficient, and we have a lot of progress to do in these sectors. To reduce water used by irrigation, and as it had been said also, to protect water resources, again, diffuse pollution for agriculture, for intensive agriculture. Fertilizer, pesticides are maybe the main sources of pollution of our water resources. When we have solved the problem of industry and municipalities, it's easy, more or less, to solve the problem of point pollutions because we have all the techniques we need. But to solve the problem of intensive agriculture with diffuse pollutions is something quite complicated in all the countries in the world, but it's a key issue for the future because we need to reuse water from upstream to downstream. The same drop has to be used many times if we want to be able to satisfy all the demands of all the users. And this is not the same sole users. We have also the productions of fish, which are a key issue for the food of some populations in Africa, in Asia, in Latin America. We have to reorganize inland navigations because with low water during the dry seasons, it will not be the same. And inland navigation is a key issue for our economy. In the Rhine, in the Mississippi, you know, also in the Senegal rivers, the rivers are the way for business, for exchange between human beings and our economies. And we have also to produce energy. We need to produce clean energy with hydropower, taking into account the new way we have in mind for building new dams when we have the place for building new dams. In Europe, we do not have. So it's easy to solve the problem. But we are able in Africa, in Asia, in Latin America to build new dams on a very careful way, taking into account all the requirements of the environment. And what to do also with the cooling of nuclear and thermal electricity plants. In Europe, one of our key issues in dry period will be the cooling of nuclear plants. And there is a problem to give water to all the other users when we have this kind of priority in mind. So water is a key issue for the future of humanity. We have to manage water at basin level, and we are very happy that we take the occasion of COP21, of course, to propose the signature of the Paris Pact for better adaptations of water resources in the basin of rivers, lakes, and aquifers. We were in doubt at the beginning of this initiative. How many signatories will share with us the same ideas. And we are lucky. It's a chance because more than 300 organizations around the world, and almost all the multilateral organizations and all the international commission and international authorities of transboundary water rivers in Europe and in Africa, plus the Mekong River, also signed the pact with other kinds of stakeholders. So at this moment, sure that the Paris Pact is one of the very positive results of the first week of the COP. That has been strongly supported at the political levels because a lot of ministers present at the COP also signed the pact, mainly the 2nd of December. So now we have to do the job. Just to do it as a publicity. And we have to work with all the signatories and the other interesting in our ideas and investing in actions for better managing water at basin level, to see what will be happening in the field. It's not just for signing at the COP21. We have now to implement. And with our colleagues, we shall be following what happened and what the signatory of the pact will do for the future. Just do it. We are on the way to prepare the future together. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Mr. Secretary General. That your inspiration and your leadership on the Paris Pact has given us way in inspiration for the International River Basin Agreement on climate risk, food safety, and water security. And it is my pleasure at this time that MRCTI would join as a signature of the Paris Pact and would love to have you join with the International River Basin Agreement put forward by us. We'd love to have the Rhine sign along with us as the beginning of working on the significant issues of achieving food and water safety for all of us. I think at this point we will, Colin will come up and we will do a ceremonial signature. So we even have a ceremonial pen. Well, thank you so much. That is very exciting indeed. We're so glad to be a part of the Paris Pact and to have your participation in the International River Basin Agreement. So thank you so much. Well, the conclusion of tonight's program will perhaps be the highlight. I will put some high pressure on our next speaker, but I know that she can deliver. I said, bring it home for us, please. She is the North American representative for the United Nations Environmental Program. Has been a tremendous counselor to our endeavor at MRCTI. Patricia Beneke has a team in D.C. And the UNEP team headed by Keith Alverson in Nairobi have brought us to this point that we are here today. There's much to do and many international actors to bring in and work with, and the path forward will require skilled operatives. And so we're so glad to have Patricia's guidance and counsel on this one, and we're very lucky to now have her word. So Patricia, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mayor Coleman. Can everybody hear me okay? Yeah, good. Well, first of all, let me say to all of my colleagues on the stage, congratulations on signing this agreement. One more round of applause. I think it is terrific that you are undertaking these collaborative efforts to bring river basins together on a global basis to address the issue of climate risk. So important. As director of the Regional Office for North America of the United Nations Environment Program, I'm delighted to have been invited by the mayors of the Mississippi River Cities and Towns Initiative to join them at this side event here at COP21. I actually had the pleasure of meeting with them last on the banks of the Mississippi River, right outside of Dubuque, Iowa. And that occurred earlier this year. I had the opportunity to see firsthand some of the terrific resiliency and restoration work taking place in the Mississippi River Basin. And before joining UNEP, I had the privilege of working on issues relating to other great river basins in the United States, such as the Columbia River Basin, the Colorado, the Sacramento and San Joaquin rivers in California, the Platte, and the Everglades, which is in Florida. It's also called the River of Grass. These were all place-based efforts. We didn't look at the lines on the map. We looked at the reach of the river basin. They were collaborative efforts with state and local and national government agencies all involved. Stakeholders and civil society were brought in, and we relied on the best science that we could get our hands on to help make and guide management decisions in these basins. So I think I personally have a real appreciation for the important role that collaborative place-based efforts can play in managing river basins for multiple uses. UNEP acts as a catalyst, advocate, educator, and facilitator to promote sustainable development and conservation of the environment. We support UN member states as they integrate ecosystem-based approaches within their water resource management strategies, and we focus on the issues you would think we would: water quality, conserving aquatic ecosystems, governance of water resources, and most importantly, and most relevant here today at COP21, resilience to climate change. These mayors come from a river basin in the heartland of the United States. It plays a crucial role in food production and global food security. But the river also has many other uses: transportation, irrigation, flood control, drinking water, and the like. And it's also a river basin well known in the United States for its ecosystem restoration program that addresses habitat issues and science and resource monitoring, all very important in river basin management. UNEP works with river basins around the world to foster implementation of integrated water resources management and to highlight the important role that ecosystems play in ensuring long-term water and food security. As was mentioned, a year ago, UNEP and the International Network of Basin Organizations convened the first ever International Environment Forum for Basin Organizations in Nairobi, Kenya. And the meeting was attended by stakeholders in the management of major freshwater basins from around the world, including the Nile and Volta rivers, the Aral Sea, and Lake Titicaca. The primary objective of the forum was to strengthen river basin organizations as key building blocks for effective environmental governance. And UNEP and INBO are planning a second international forum, and we hope that it will be a good platform for basin organizations across the world to strengthen their capacity. UNEP promotes an integrated landscape approach which supports increased production on the basis of healthy ecosystems, seeking to achieve multiple social, economic, and environmental objectives. And this, of course, is key to implementation. This integrated implementation will be required to implement the new Sustainable Development Goals included in the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda, adopted earlier this year by the member states of the UN. And of course, an integrated approach is going to be essential to implementing the outcome of this very important conference on climate change. So I think I want to conclude right here to leave time for at least a few questions. But again, congratulations to everyone here on the stage for your great efforts. Congratulations to the Mississippi River mayors for reaching out to other river basins and for going global. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That was perfect timing because we only have 5 minutes left for questions. So I thought maybe I'd take two if there's two eager question askers out there. Okay, I've got one there, perfect. And then maybe we can have a 1 minute response each.
Hi, I'm Keziah Growthuft. I come from New Jersey on the banks of the Delaware, much smaller river. But I was wondering if any of you had suggestions for small river communities and responding to effects of climate change.
And one more right in the middle.
Yes, I'm Stefano Mannaccio from Cobase. Just a vision. We have a project entitled The Electrical City and Agroecological Parks. In our vision, it seems that cities are not good clients for river basins because they take a lot of resources and they give back more or less waste. In our vision, biodiversity is very important. From one side, biodiversity, the decrease on biodiversity in river basins makes basins more vulnerable. And from the other side, we think that cities and urban systems must be more biodiverse to be better client for city rivers. As far as food production is concerned, I would like to share this vision and your thought about that.
You do not have big and small river basin. You have river basins. River basin of rivers, lakes, aquifers, river basin of coastal small rivers. You have national rivers, you have transboundary rivers. Of course, the more you have partners, the more it's difficult. And in transboundary basin in particular, you need, first of all, political agreement. But you have exactly the same problem for a small river or a small tributary in a national river. You have different kind of users, different kind of challenges. And you have, of course, to take all these issues on an integrated approach. It's also the occasion to answer your questions. You have two different levels. You have the levels of managing water resources, which are not dedicated to one use, to another. Water resources had to be managed in the natural environment where they are flooding, and this is the basins. After, you have second levels, the level of different users, domestic users, agriculture, aquaculture, inland navigations, hydropower, and so on, industry, of course. All of them have to also work for a better use of water and reduce their pollutions. But what will be happening for a big town if there is no water in the river? Your drinking water system will be in difficulties. So all the different stakeholders had to be put around the same tables to have visions, a common vision of their future, to identify the black point, and also to solve the problem together. One of our proposals within our network is the creations of river council or river basins where we may have all the people's concerned around the table, not only the government, not only the big users, but all of the peoples which are working, even smallly, around the table. Not all of them, they are representative, of course, but it's a good solutions for involving every sectors. And if this is working for big rivers in the Rhine, you associate now all the stakeholders, not of course in the official international commissions where you have the diplomats and so on, but with a lot of working groups where all the users in the basin, whenever the countries they are living, are involved for discussing, for preparing the decision and so on. The same for a small river. You may have a local water commissions where all the different parties are around the table and discussing of their future. This is their water. If they want to save waters, if they want to have their water for their use, if they want to have a clean water and clean ecosystem for bathing or for tourism, or also because they are free end of the birds, they have to put on the table all their different issues and solve them on a common agreement. Without a common agreement, you cannot progress. And it's a key issue, not only the political had to be very clear on the priority of water, but also all the stakeholders had to be a member of the team fighting for better water in the future.
Please be brief.
I'll say something. I guess my comment on the Delaware River would be, as they say, think globally, act locally. And no matter what size the river is, if you take steps locally to protect it, I think that that is helping, and to manage the multiple uses of it, I think that that helps plan and address the issue of resilience.
Perhaps one word from my side. I think I fully agree what you have said about the water basins, big or small. It depends on your criteria. They all have the same criteria. There must be good ecological quality of the water. That is the objective of all of them, being small, being big. And how you come there effectively, the best is by involving all the stakeholders and by consensus.
If I could just describe one project we had in the city of Dubuque, and it has to do with what at one time was a creek that ran through some of our older neighborhoods. And that creek has had, that B branch sewer system had 6 presidential disaster declarations in the past 12 years because of flash flooding. What we decided to do as a community, and we got all the neighbors together, we created a program where we're daylighting that creek. And we're creating the capacity to handle a 500-year storm at a very slow rate, no more than 5 miles an hour through that neighborhood. When that creek is not running at that level, when it's just the water from springs, it's a linear park with riparian ways, hike-bike trails, community gardens. All of that was a cheaper cost than putting in more storm sewers and flush the water into the river with all the pollutants still in it. So that was just a project along what was a creek in a small city. We're a city of 58,000 that will mitigate and make that a safe area and create resiliency in our community.
Great. A round of applause for our panelists. Thank you very much. Representing our beautiful rivers all over the world, and I'm sure beautiful communities and places to live. Thanks to all of you for coming. Thanks for our online audience. Be sure to join us the rest of the week. We have several events. Just a couple highlights tomorrow. Governor Jerry Brown will be speaking in the evening at this time slot, 5:45 p.m. And at 1:15 p.m., Wanjira Maathai, daughter of the famous conservationist Wangari Maathai, will be speaking here as well on a Women in Africa Energy event. So hope to see you tomorrow. Thank you.